China plans to use unmanned drones to increase its presence around the islands that are at the center of a volatile dispute with Japan. They will conduct marine surveillance of the area. 3 Chinese patrol vessels still remain very close to the uninhabited but strategic archipelago and have briefly entered waters which Japan considers its territory. The conflict's seen large-scale protests in both countries turn ugly. The row could be further complicated as Taiwanese boats are now heading to the islands to reassert their fishing rights in the area, while all around the U.S. is increasing its military activity in the region. For an expert's opinion on the story, I'm now joined live by James Corbett, editor of the Corbett Report website from Japan. Thank you, James, for joining us today. Now tell us, why is there so much deep-rooted interest in these tiny, uninhabited islands?
Well, ostensibly, this is about the potential oil and gas reserves that have been estimated to be in that area. So this is what the geopolitical calculus is about. But I think we have to understand this entire dispute not in terms of the islands themselves, which most average Japanese and average Chinese people, I think, don't really care about. I think this is being played up as a nationalist sentiment and nationalist fervor. And there's a couple of reasons for this. I think one of them is the political calculus that both countries are making right now. In fact, China is going through its once every 10 years leadership change. So we'll see Hu Jintao replaced by Xi Jinping later this year. And Japan was also going through an election cycle of sorts here, with the ruling Democratic Party of Japan having an internal leadership election. And I think both sides of that dispute, just like in any election cycle in the U.S. or Russia or anywhere else in the world, the leaders like to play up their international prestige and talk tough to a perceived enemy or threat during an election season or cycle. And I think that's part of what's been going on here. And I think also this the entire conflict gives both sides room to put out more of their pieces on the chessboard, as it were, so that China, for example, can use this as a cover to announce the deployment of drones in 2015, and Japan can use this as a chance to increase their military ties with the U.S.
Now, there's a third party that's also directly involved in the island row, and that's Taiwan. Where is it all heading? Will other countries get dragged in as well?
It is potentially, I suppose it is possible, depending on how this unfolds. And I think part of the underlying political calculus is that both sides wants this to be a big dispute in diplomatic terms, but I don't think either side is really looking for military confrontation at this point. So I think that would be a break on any sort of larger development going on here. But having said that, I think if there was to be one side that overacted, I think the other side would be more likely to overreact because of this kind of tense time that's going on politically. So it has the potential to get bigger. And right now, Australia is being proposed as a third party to arbitrate in a trilateral security talk between Canberra, Beijing, and Tokyo over this dispute. So we'll see if it does broaden out into the region. But right now, Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihiko Noda is in New York to attend the UN General Assembly meeting, and he will likely raise this dispute while he's there. So this is becoming a bit of an international issue. Now,
James, very briefly, I do want to delve a little more into Taiwan. Do you think the conflict will trigger a surge in separatist sentiment there?
I suppose there's that possibility, and in a strange way, it almost unites it with China in that they're both disputing Japan's claims. So I suppose it has the potential to go either way, and I wouldn't pronounce on the Taiwanese position on this, but I think that certainly at this moment, both sides see Japan as the enemy more than they see each other as the enemy. So I think there might be strategic alliances, etc., but in terms of really changing the balance of power in that relationship, I don't think it will have a huge effect in and of itself.
All right, and finally, the protests in China could certainly cost Japanese businesses billions of dollars. How will the dispute play out for the country's economies?
Well, that's, I think, part of this calculus, the political calculus that's going on. I think there's also an economic price to pay for this because, of course, it destabilizes markets and it creates volatility. We see the Japanese market declining on this dispute, as well as the rising yen. So I think that both sides have an interest in not seeing this spill over into too large a confrontation. They want to keep the political rhetoric up, but I don't think they want it to really destabilize the markets too much. So I think that also puts a brake on it. And we have have seen in recent days Beijing starting to crack down on some of these protests that were getting quite widespread. So I think that the brakes are being applied, but we'll have to again see how this plays out and make sure that if one side reacts, there could be a potential for much more violence in the region.
And what about Washington's position on all of this? I mean, they've made it very clear that it will be on Tokyo's side in case of further escalation of the dispute. How do you expect China will respond to that?
Well, as expected, that can only raise tensions in the area, but I think that's all part of the long-term strategy as we see the U.S. starting its Asia-Pacific pivot. So I think it actually has an interest in increasing tensions between Japan and China, because that makes Japan ever more eager to accept American military presence, which up until now there's been quite strong protests against, but now we see them renewing joint military exercises in Guam, etc. So it is increasing the Japanese reliance on the American security blanket, as it were, and I think that plays into American interests. So I think they actually probably benefit from this dispute.
All right, live from Japan with his insight and analysis, James Corbett, editor of the Corbett Report website. Thank you for your time.